various guests, in particular Amitav Ghosh, and we sort of broadened this particular discussion today is even broader, but yet slightly different angles. And Bobby will moderate this event, and here he is.
Thank you. It's my great good fortune to be able to welcome you all here to this extraordinary gathering. The Nightingale Brown House, where we all now sit, is an entirely appropriate setting for this conversation about writing beyond borders, as it was built on the wealth accumulated from America's colonial China trade. Its trade in ice, opium, and tea. And so let me move quickly to get this started. I want to have this be as open a conversation as possible. After I introduce my guests, I'll ask them to introduce themselves with a short reading of their work. And then perhaps start the conversation with a few questions that I've been thinking about. But then quickly open it as quickly to the audience. I'm sure that we will all have questions for all of them. Let me begin by introducing our guests as they are seated next to me, to my left. Amitav Ghosh was born in Calcutta, grew up in India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. He studied in Delhi, Oxford, and Alexandria, and was the author of The Circle of Reason, The Shadow Lines in an Antique Land, Dancing in Cambodia, The Calcutta Chromosome, The Glass Palace, Hungry Tide, and Sea of Poppies and River of Smoke, which are the first two volumes of a projected series of novels, the Ibis Trilogy. His Circle of Reason was awarded France's Prix Medici in 1990. The Shadow Lines won 2 prestigious Indian prizes the same year, the Satya Akademi Award and the Ananda Puraskar. The Calcutta Chromosome was awarded the Arthur C. Clarke Award for 1997. And the Glass Palace won the International eBook Award at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2001. In 2005, The Hungry Tide was awarded the Crossword Book Prize, the Major Indian Award. His novel, Sea of Poppies, was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize in 2008. He was awarded the Crossword Book Prize in the India Plaza Gold. Amitav Ghosh's work has been translated into more than 20 languages. His essays have been published in The New Yorker, the New Republic, the New York Times, and he's taught at many universities in India and the United States, including Delhi University, Columbia, Queens College, and Harvard. To his left is David McKirdy. He's Hong Kongese, although born in Scotland, but raised and educated and resides still in Hong Kong. We in Asian America would call a 1.5 generation Hong Kongese. He's an organizer of the Hong Kong poetry group Out Loud, and a former director of the Man Hong Kong International Literary Festival. His work has appeared in anthologies and literary journals. His collection of poetry, Accidental Occidental, was published in 2005. And he repairs and rebuilds vintage cars.
I've got to make a living somehow. I want to do long poetry.
Next to David is Xue, a native of Beijing, who left China after taking part in the 1989 demonstrations in Tiananmen Square. Xue has been a fellow at Brown's Freedom to Write program. Among his works are 3 books of poetry in Chinese, Hui, Remembering, Li, Trembling, and Lung Yi, Dream Talk. And 5 books in English translation, Heart into Soil, Circumstances, An Ordinary Day, Another Kind of Tenderness, and Zone. His poetry has also appeared in American Letters and Commentary, Agni, Lit, International, The Drunken Boat, and Parthenon West Review. Xue has twice been awarded a Hellman Hammett Award sponsored by Human Rights. And on far left, geographically, is Hajin. Hajin was a teenager in China when the Cultural Revolution began. He became a member of the People's Liberation Army at age 14. His novel, Waiting, won him the National Book Award in 1999 and the PEN Faulkner Award in 2000. Was award based on his experiences in his 5-year service in the PLA. He was awarded the PEN Faulkner Award again in 2005 for his novel War Trash. His newest books are Free Life, 2007, and The Writer as Migrant, 2008, a collection of lectures. He has received 3 pushcart prizes for fiction and a Kenyan Review Prize. Many of his short stories have appeared in the Best American Short Stories anthologies, and his collection, Under the Red Flag, in 1997, won the Flannery O'Connor Award for Short Fiction. Most recently, he's published the novel Nanjing Requiem, which was published this last year. So with those brief introductions, which only touch on the immense literary production of our guests, I'd like to have our guests introduce themselves with a short reading of their work.
We will start with Amitav?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to start by just saying how nice it is to be here in this room, in this house, which is sort of built upon the relationship that I've been writing about between India and China and the whole cycle of the opium trade. And so it is kind of interesting to be doing this here. But I'd like to thank Professor Tan for inviting me here to be here today. And it's really a very great privilege to be here with David McKirdy, who I met in Hong Kong a couple of years ago, with Xue, and with Hajin, whose work I've admired for a very long time. It's really a great privilege. I'm going to read to you a little bit from A River of Smoke. And I should explain that this little bit comes from the last part of the book. It's set in a meeting of the Canton Chamber of Commerce. And this meeting happens in March 1839, and it's the meeting which really set the course of the Opium War, because what has happened here is that Commissioner Lin Zexu has sent a kind of ultimatum to the Chamber of Commerce saying, stop bringing in opium, sign a bond, give me, I want to confiscate all the opium that you have in your ships. And this is when they're discussing this, and it's one of the characters here is Behram Modi, who's a Parsi merchant from Bombay. And there are a few other characters as well. So I'm going to begin by, the meeting begins with them reading out the Commissioner Lin's ultimatum. And I'm going to read to you the last paragraph of the ultimatum. The utter annihilation of the opium trade is now my first object. And I have given commands to the foreigners to deliver up to the government all the opium which they have on board their warehousing vessels. I have called on them also to sign a bond in Chinese and in the foreign languages, declaring that henceforth they will never venture to bring opium into China again. And if any should again be brought, their property shall be confiscated by the government. These commands are now given to you, Gohong merchants, that you may convey them to the foreign factories and plainly make them known. It is imperative that the forceful character of the commands be made clearly to appear. It is imperative for you merchants to act with energy and loftiness of purpose, to unite in enjoining these commands upon the foreign merchants. 3 days are prescribed within which you must obtain the required bonds and merchandise. If it is found that this matter cannot be resolved by you immediately, then it will be inferred that you are acting in concert with foreign criminals, and I, the High Commissioner, will forthwith solicit the royal death warrant and select for execution 1 or 2 of you. Do not claim you did not receive timely notice. A murmur of disbelief went around the table now. Bahram, who thought he had misheard, said, "Did you say execution, Mr. Wetmore?" "Yes, I did, Mr. Modi." "Are you telling us," said Mr. Lindsay, "that the commissioner may send 2 of the Kohong merchants to the gallows if we do not surrender our goods and furnish this bond?" "No, sir," said Mr. Wetmore. "I believe they will be beheaded, not hung. And our friends, Haukwa and Makwa, are persuaded that they will be the first to die." A collective gasp was heard around the table. Then Mr. Burnham said, "There can be no doubt of it. This Commissioner Lin is a monster. None but a madman or a monster could have such scant regard for human life as to consider executing 2 men for such a crime." "Indeed, Mr. Burnham?" It was Mr. Charles King speaking from the other end of the table. "You are evidently greatly solicitous of human life, which is undoubtedly a most commendable thing. But may I ask, why your concern does not extend to the lives you put in jeopardy with your consignments of opium? Are you not aware that with every shipment you are condemning hundreds, maybe thousands of people to death? Do you see nothing monstrous in your own actions?" "No, sir," answered Mr. Burnham coolly, "because it is not my hand that passes sentence upon those who choose the indulgence of opium. It is the work of another, invisible, omnipotent. It is the hand of freedom, of the market, of the spirit of liberty itself, which is none other than the breath of God." So I'll stop there.
Great pleasure to be here. Thank you, all of you, for inviting me. I'm going to read a few poems in chronological order, which I hope will illustrate my relationship with Hong Kong. The first one is called Outward Bound, and there's one acronym in there, which is POSH. And I don't know if many of you know what it means, but during colonial days, the rich people would go out on the side of the ship which the sun didn't shine, which was the port side, and on the way back, they would come on the starboard side. So POSH is an acronym for Port Out, Starboard Home, in case any of you didn't know that. Outward bound. Hannibal crossed the Alps for conquest and glory. We, adventurers of a different stripe, crossed the sea. Destination Hong Kong on the P&O liner SS Carthage, built by fellow Scots, launched on our own River Clyde. Up the gangway hand in hand we boarded, working class folk with bootstrap aspirations, to cabins, second class, the apartheid of imperial caste. No posh travel for us, but so-so, starboard out, staying out. Unlike that great general, never coming home to disappointment and betrayal. As we waved goodbye, streamers severed our links, leaving monochrome memories and the 1950s in our wake. Through Port Said, Suez, Aden, and beyond, black and white Britain displaced, obscured, forgotten by senses now shaken, by shocking, pungent, grating colors, odors, and sounds. Familiarity growing as we travel ever eastward, warm and wet like a return to the womb. Perhaps I'll linger here a while. I was very fortunate to have 2 ladies bring me up, my mother and my Chinese nanny. And in Hong Kong we refer to a Chinese nanny as an ama, and my ama's name was Ame. So this is for Ame. Ama, nanny, auntie, sister, servant. A simple woman in black and white, not young, no threat. a mouthful of gold, a gilt-edged hedge against famine, war, and pestilence. Poor and illiterate, ideal for scrubbing, but entrusted with a stranger's child, a necessity or a convenience for those too busy, too ill, too worldly, trusting eternal motherly love of any woman or any child, leaving her own family deprived of appropriate maternal attention. Myths of hungry ghosts, one-armed swordsmen, culinary treats, and Chinese opera. We absorb, acquire, adopt an alien culture and another mother tongue. These bonds can never be broken. Love is thicker than blood. Ame, ama, mama. 50 years on, the shadow of your presence remains, as the wax from the candle I light for you rolls down like tears. I was rather sick about 12 years ago, and I had a blood transfusion in a Hong Kong hospital. And all of the donors are Chinese, so I finally got some Chinese blood, which sometimes makes me feel a bit more at home. Ancestral worship. I've got the blood of China in my veins, not through father, mother, or distant forebears, but passed on from another's ancient line. 7 pints passed through the eye of a needle, the anonymous gift of life for a bastard son, a white ghost. I feel different as I look at life through my wider, less jaundiced eyes. We Chinese treasure our traditions, but whose ancestors should I worship now, mine or his? Maybe I'll just give thanks, pay homage to an eternal mother and the universal father. I live in a Chinese fishing village, and we get weekend visitors there, come by the busload. So this is an experience that I had there, and it's called ambush. An elderly man approached, inquiring about a toilet for his wife. She was such a lovely old lady. How could I leave her in distress? Come, auntie, you're welcome to use my home. Before I knew it, 1 had become 2, then 5, and finally 9, all queued up and smiling. Soon enough, I was handing out soap and towels like a washroom attendant in a massage parlor. Then the questioning began. No one expects the Chinese Inquisition. Forget name, rank, and serial number. These are no mere amateurs. Cantonese aunties are better than KGB interrogators at getting results. They got my name, age, place of birth. Do I own or rent? How much per month? Married? How many children? I could have stood a beating, but they were much too subtle for that, calling me by name and talking in turn. I managed to hang on to my 1 testicle and annual salary, but only because their bus was leaving. But they know where I live, and they'll be back. One very, very brief final one, which to me illustrates the nature of living in a Chinese city and how international Chinese and Chinese people have really become. This is called We Chinese. In Strasbourg, 3 Chinese asked for directions in French. I answered in Cantonese. Surprised, they tried German. Finally, we expressed our pleasure at meeting fellow countrymen abroad in English. Thank you so much.
It's an honor to be invited to participate in this event. It's a great honor to participate in the Year of China. Thank you, and thank you all for coming. My name is Xue. I actually was born and brought up in Beijing, and then went to the high school. During 1966, there was the Cultural Revolution. That was the time I started to go to the college and university, but all the colleges and universities in that time was shutting down. So I kind of during that time self-taught and went to a specific technical school to train to work in the film lighting institute. So I spent 10 years after I after I get out of high school and went to this film lighting institute to make the light bulb for film projection. And of course, at that time, we were just assigned to go to a place. There was no choice, no option to say no to the decision from the union, the governor. So I didn't really. I mean, it was a cool job, but I didn't really like it. Didn't want to spend all my life to make light bulbs or projecting film. So I find a way back then. That's part of a Chinese system. Say if you are sick, whatever, you could really stay home. You get 80% of the salary from the unit. That called, this socialism benefit. So I really desperately want to have time to write, to do my writing, to work in the unit. There's no way I could really do. So I asked a friend of mine, say, I know someone knows, the expert know how to fake units. So I asked him if you could tell me something I could learn, and then I maybe fake something I could stay home and then, don't have to go to work. And then he said, what kind of illness you want? I could give you something like you could take 1 week break, you could take 1 month, you'll take your lifetime stay home. I say, wow, sounds really cool. I said, what's the deal with those different? He said, you could learn the best one, the longest one. You have to retrieve me in the one restaurant. It's really so high, it's unreachable. I would spend like half a year of my salary to treat this person to go there. He actually is a friend of mine. He really liked my poem a lot. So I say, since we are really good friends, let me know the middle one. So he showed me the middle one. It's something like, you kind of fake you have your heart beating is really, really bad. So he told me something. So you go to the hospital. What do we do? We usually go to the hospital as the little stickers. We put it right there in the order, and the doctor will call one by one. And then so what you do is when you see almost your turn, his trick is you go into the bathroom and start to swing your arms so fast, rapidly. Then you come back to your heart rate. Then you go to see the doctor test, oh my God, but it not always work, that trick, because sometimes doctor just start take a break, have a smoke, have a cigarette, have a tea. Then you are waiting there, after a while, your heart beating is slowing down. You go, okay, fine, go home. It did not work. I see that trick did not really work. I need to learn something really secure and really make it. So I had to treat him. Yeah, no, that's back to China. So then he told me something could make the blood pressure very high at that time. I also could control certain kind of level of the blood pressure. I didn't know it worked or not. My father is a Chinese tradition doctor, so I tested with my father. I say one day, I think I have some kind of blood pressure problem. Could you measure me? He said, no, you have no problem. You eat well, you drink a lot, you really go out, exercise a lot, so fine. I said, just test it. So he tested. I did the trick. Was going up so high. He was panicked. He said, what happened to you? I said, don't worry, I'm gonna do it again. Then the second time, everything totally normal. He was so confused because he's a doctor. He believes in science. He believes there's nothing that can really fake your body like that. He really wants to know because he's a doctor. He really wants. I say, there's a trick. It's a trick. Don't worry. He said, no, I want to know. I say, if you want to know, okay, you take me that restaurant. That's how the guy learned the trick. He thought about it. He want to know. Then it's too much money. He did not treat me. He still, every time now I go back to China, he said, how did you do it? How did you do it? I got her. So I stayed in China, participated in 1989, participating in student, and peaceful demonstration movement, and then the movement was crashing down. I was kind of in danger. So I got this Hammond Award and supporting Amitav Ghosh and Brown. And when I was in China, I just traveled a lot of places. I went to Inner Mongolia, stayed there for 3 months. It was one of the best time I had. And I also went to Tibet, went to many different places. So I came to this country, then spent years as a visiting scholar in and then finally there was a chance to get a formal job at the Brown. So I applied. I now become the technician. I work in the CIT as a media service technician to support event. Usually this kind of event, I would say there with a microphone and a projection. So I would like to read a short poem to introduce myself. I'm grateful to Professor Lee to reading the English translation. That's usually when I give reading, I used to give the bilingual reading. I would read in Chinese and invite a friend or poet, to read my work in English translation. Before this poem, this short poem is entitled Hotel Viking. This Hotel Viking is located in Newport. So before I'm going to read this, I just want to say a little bit of this little story about this poem, short poem. When I just came to this country, I came to this country in 1990. I did not know how to speak English at all. So in 1991, I was invited to the university to go to university to give a reading. But I went to this hotel when I went to that university to give a reading, the person who is in charge just put me in the hotel, said, your readings tomorrow morning is very early, so hopefully you will sleep good, but be careful, don't go out, you don't know the places, so you hardly speak English. So, it's not safe probably for you to wander around, stay. So we had early dinner, then they left, I stayed in the hotel, and by whatever reason, the TV did not work. And I did not know how to turn, it was really cold, I did not know how to turn the thermometer, just to get the heat. And when I was in China, we were poor at that time. Most of the time I traveled, I stayed in a friend's house. So that was the first time almost in this country I stayed in a fancy hotel. I was so excited, But then the room was so cold, it was so boring, the TV was off. I could not do anything. I get cold and colder, and I did not know how to I did not know how to make a phone call to ask the hotel person to make adjustment of the temperature. So finally what I did is I had so much time to kill. I was very energetic. I was so early. So what I did is there's a hotel has 2 single bed in the room. So what I did, I just started getting on the bed. I jumped from one bed to another bed, and I was jumping. So capitalism. This is because that was my almost first fancy experience about to stay in a hotel. I was dreaming to stay in a hotel when I travel all over China. Had very rare chance. So I was jumping in the shouting capitalism. After half hour, I was exhausted, so I went to bed to sleep. So that was my first hotel experience. So then next time when I went to Newport State, the Hotel Viking, I wrote this poem. So this poem called Hotel Viking. Thanks for reading the English translation.维京人旅馆，沿着双地客人驶离的方向，海水像永久的棉被，沉沉地压在雀角的身上。天空在散开的鱼群眼睛里越来越亮，那座跨过盐水的桥，也跨过中年人大脑里的黑暗，路途黑暗，在精确的四肢中。独生的母亲悲哀时，这个远行的儿子写信，孤独的水鸟连的灯火像风一样离飞翔。这个夜晚，旅馆房间的调温器不停止的轰鸣，号码634。当我拿出钥匙，黑暗中，一些最优秀的人正在我的祖国消失。
I can do this justice. Hotel Viking. In the wake of a prefabricated passenger ship, the ocean, as if it were with a cold cotton blanket, weighs deeply on a body wide awake. The sky, in the eyes of a scattered school of fish, grows brighter and brighter. The bridge that spans the brine crosses also the opaque, middle-aged mind, dark path between 2 precise turns. My mother, grieving, writes her faraway son. Waterbirds, lonely, follow the lights towards regions of cold where they hover. This evening, the hotel room's thermosystem thundered without rest. Number 634 set the key in the unlit hallway. In my homeland, some valuable persons are disappearing.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm kind of local. I live in Massachusetts. So in fact, this is my second time to be in this room. Before I start, I'd like to thank Professor Tan Tan, also Bob, for inviting me again. And I'm also very happy to read or to be on the panel with Xue and David and Amitav Ghosh. In fact, yesterday, a student of mine from India, we talked about their work. So you are always you always appear as a reference in our classroom because for in a lot of writing students, big issue, especially for some students from the States, how to make personal story become more resonant to social issues, how to set a story in a historical, political context. That was very hard for them to do. So as a result, your name also comes up. And also for some Indian students from the subcontinent, how to use English. For me, I think that really that problem is already has been resolved by a group of Indian writers. You are one of them, and also Seth and a few others. So that's why I'm very happy to be here, to be on the same panel with you finally. And I'm going to read in fact, the last part of a very short story from my collection, Good Fall. All the stories are set in Flushing, so they are immigrant stories about the first generation Chinese immigrants. And I don't have time to read the whole thing, so that's why I'm going to read the last part to give away the story. Before this moment, the speaker here, the narrator is a waitress. She had a younger sister back in China who had been divorced, but the sister was doing well, and she decided to buy a car. But to the older sister in the States, in Flushing, the car was unnecessary for the younger sister. But still, the younger sister believed she must have a car because everybody has one in the hometown. It's a very small town. And so, but before this moment, suddenly they began to use email. Before that, they used to write letters, but now they have email. They got very excited, but now it became a problem because they could communicate more often every day. Then, why couldn't she just go ahead and buy a car if that was what she wanted? She replied, "You don't get it, sister. I cannot drive a Chinese model. If I did, people would think I'm cheap and laugh at me. Japanese and German cars are too expensive for me. So I might get a Hyundai Elantra or a Ford Focus. Please lend me $10,000. I'm begging you to help me out." That was insane. Foreign cars are double priced in China. A Ford Taurus sells for 250,000 yuan in my home province of Sichuan, more than $30,000. I told Yu Qin an automobile was just a vehicle, no need to be fancy. She must drop her vanity. Certainly, I wouldn't lend her the money, because that might amount to getting a dog with a meatball. Nothing would come back. So I said no. As it is, I'm still renting and have to save for the down payment on a small apartment somewhere in Queens. My family always assumes that I can pick up cash right and left here. No matter how hard I explain, they can't see how awful my job at the sushi house is. I waitress 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. My legs were swollen when I punched out at 10 p.m. I might never be able to buy an apartment at all. I'm eager to leave my job and start something of my own, a snack bar or a nail salon or a video store. I must save every penny. For 2 weeks, Yu Qin and I argued how I hated the email exchanges. Every morning, I flicked on the computer and saw a new message from her, sometimes 3 or 4. I often thought of ignoring them, but if I did, I'd fidget at work as if I had eaten something that had upset my stomach. If only I had pretended I'd never gotten her email at the outset, so that we could have continued writing letters. I used to believe that in the United States, you could always reshape your relationships with the people back home. You could restart your life on your own terms, but the internet has spoiled everything. My family is able to get hold of me whenever they like, and they might as well live nearby. 4 days ago, Yuqin sent me this message. Elder sister, since you refused to help me, I decided to act on my own. At any rate, I must have a car. Please don't be mad at me. Here is a website you should take a look at. I was late for work, so I didn't visit the site. For a whole day, I kept wondering what she was up to, and my left eyelid twitched nonstop. She might have solicited donations. She was impulsive and could get outrageous. When I came back that night and turned on the computer, I was flabbergasted to see that she had put out an ad on a popular site. She announced, healthy young woman, ready to offer you her organs in order to buy a car, willing to sell any part as long as I can still drive afterward. Contact me and let us talk. She listed her phone number and email address. I wondered if she was just bluffing. Perhaps she was. On the other hand, she was such a hothead that for a damn car, she might not hesitate to sell a kidney or a cornea or a piece of her liver. I couldn't help but call her names while rubbing my forehead. I had to do something right away. Someone might take advantage of the situation and sign a contract with her. She was my only sibling. If she messed up her life, there would be nobody to care for my old parents. If I was living nearby, I might have called her bluff, but now there was no way out. I wrote her back, all right, my idiot sister, I will lend you $10,000. Remove your ad from the website now. In a couple of minutes, she returned. Thank you, gonna take it off right away. I know you are the only person I can rely on in the whole world. I responded, I will lend you the money I made by working my ass off. You must pay it back within 2 years. I've kept a hard copy of our email exchanges, so don't assume you can write off the loan. She came back, got it, have a nice dream, sister. She added a smile sign. Get out of my face, I muttered. If only I could shut her up of my mind for a few weeks. If only I could go somewhere for some peace and quiet.
Let me just start a conversation, and I hope the audience will also jump in. I think writing, you've all written about China and its engagement in the world, from the opium war, content trade, political war, all the way to China and the internet, right? And you've also written, I think, from, if you will, the borderlands of China, whether the Chinese diaspora in Flushing, or in the the foreign Hongs of Canton, or Hong Kong, or in Providence and Newport. So the question is, what are the boundaries, if you will, of China as a kind of literary subject? And how do you kind of negotiate the idea of writing about China as a kind of literary subject?
I'm not sure there are any boundaries. I think you write about the things that you find are of interest, and typically for me, of course, I live in Hong Kong. I write mainly about Hong Kong, and then some other peripheral things. But I don't think there really are any boundaries. In fact, I think one of the great things about Asia in general is that there are so many fascinating stories. Everybody has a story to tell. Hong Kong itself is a city of immigration, so you know, there were 600,000 people there at the end of the Second World War and 4 million people by the 1960s. So you know, there are these fabulous stories that you hear all the time, and so I think that subject matter is limitless.
I think David is completely right, actually, and really it was what led me to writing about China is really the story of Indians, the Indian diaspora, you know, and the ways in which the Indian diaspora hinged upon China. And I do think that one of the interesting things today about India as well as China is that they're no longer geographical areas, you know. They're sort of connected around the world, and the homeland and the diaspora have such an intimate connection, as in your story. It's a completely new phenomenon, really. You know, there's a constant to and fro.
Yeah, I don't feel the boundaries, but I feel like the difference between to live inside China, living in the United States, the way to approach the way to approach the thinking of expression of your living, the experience of your living is a very, very big difference. And since I have been living in the United States for 21 years, I also feel like the topic and the theme has been shifting according to the rapid changes inside China, relation between China and India, or relation between China and the world. So that things has been shifting, has been different angle to approach and different experience, but a boundary basically I do not feel too much of.
I think there, you know, the idea of great China, in fact, I noticed that, in fact, the lot of literary critics in China, inside China, that's the word they prefer to use. And I think what the boundary is, I'm not clear about the boundary. I think that has been shifted for a long time, for hundreds of years. But I think for me, for a writer, it's what kind of attention, where should my center of creative center for individual work? That's more important. In fact, in my introduction to my story collection, the Chinese translation published in Taiwan, to this book, A Good Fall, I mentioned that there was in fact, when the book came out, there was a well-known translator from the Chinese into English, and he said nobody would read a book like that because this is about the Chinatown people who are interested in Chinatown. And so the implication is you should talk about really the center, the centrality, the Great China. So in my introduction, I raised the question why it should be so. Why a new arrival, a new immigrant cannot have the same kind of literary attention as the Great China. And for me, that person is also China. And so I think for me, it's within the blurred boundary where to find a place for me to pay more attention to. I think that's my job.
That's interesting what you say, actually, because you know, in India, it's actually now changed. Similarly, let's say 20, 30 years ago, the interest was in the centrality, the central India, so to speak. But over the last 30 years in writing, I would say now there's a huge interest, there has been a huge interest in writing from the diaspora, you know. Especially about India towns, you know, if you think of Brick Lane or so many books. But what's also interesting is that Indian cinema, Bollywood, now caters almost exclusively to what is called the non-resident Indian. They actually do surveys amongst them, and the movies are made to suit their tastes. So it's a curious reversal that we've seen in the last 20 years.
So that means there is still space for China to do well. But I think language is a big thing. You see, and most Indian writers, the best ones, basically they don't have to live inside India. And in fact, a few years ago, I was at a conference. There was a group of Indian writers who were talking about the topic of great Indian novel. We know there are different languages, but still English is the official language, especially educated Indian citizens. This language is accessible. But for Chinese writer, that's the Chinese readers or readership audience, this is a completely different, very different, very different. For instance, even I wrote about the Chinese experience for Nanjing Reckoning. This is about a central event in China, but there are still people who think because you wrote it in English, so this is American perspective. Automatically, that would be to some critics that was categorized as Western, Western approach. So I think language, in addition to ideology, or the remaining part of the ideology, residue of the ideology, all these contribute to some kind of pigeonholing or classification among writers, especially the writers in the Chinese diaspora. As a result, most of the Chinese writers who still write in Chinese really trying to find publishers inside China, to find the readership inside China. So it's slightly different. I really admire, in a way, envy the situation for the Indian writers. You can live anywhere, but the language you use is still acceptable to the general readership. But Chinese is quite different in many ways. I hope there is a space. I think gradually, young people can speak English now, and they will. I think they will slowly develop in the direction you just described.
One thing I would say there is that, in fact, a lot of Indian writing, and some would say the best Indian writing, is done in India in Indian languages. It's not something that it's not a debate that I want to go into. But what is interesting is that Indian commercial cinema has always been in Indian languages. So in that sense, that's what's interesting, that even though they are in Hindi or Urdu, the diaspora has become so important to them.
Sure.
Even in music, it's an extraordinary thing, actually.
So it's really, in fact, become an integral part of the Indian society and culture.
Yes.
Yes. But China, I'm not sure. It's just the beginning. I think it becomes part of it.
One of the kind of following up on that, in some ways, all of you also write from a kind of using a voice of an outsider, if you will, or a resident alien, whether it's the Parsi merchant or the American missionary educator or so forth. And does that, what are the kind of advantages and disadvantages of writing with that voice? Does that give you a certain kind of freedom, or are there constraints to that?
I think both. There gives you some kind of an objective perspective, and also some more detachment. And also, it doesn't have the sense of the immediate audience, especially if I write. I always have the Chinese audience in the back of my mind. So basically, I use a language none of them would use. So it's a different kind of mindset. It can be frustrating, but gradually you have to accept the solitude as part of the process as a work condition. But on the whole, I think the most important of all, it really gives you a lot of freedom. Also the possibility for the integrity of the work. That's another part. When whatever you send, work you send to China, I think Xuedi must have the same experience. If they publish it, they just take it out, the things cut here and there. You don't have control over it. You just don't know what is the final outcome.
I think for all the writers, of course, there's a different style, right? Some writers, they are more emotional, other writers more rational, others are more focused on the technique a lot more. So this is just a style difference, as a personality difference. But in general, what I would think about, to live inside a country, to live outside a country, as I said just now, the approach is different, like Hajin mentioned about you writing your book about Nanjing, So we see, actually, so far we haven't seen few really books about Nanjing. Almost most of them is from abroad. And the inside, so that's also present a question why that's happened. But if people live inside China, talk about Nanjing, they're still very emotional. They focus on more of action. A lot of action, a lot of protection, a lot of go to the Japanese embassy, do those kind of things. But the people live outside as a scholar, as a writer, they have an advantage of collect a lot of more information and material from the library. Also, they have a little bit more broader view to see the thing. They are much more calm and more closer to the research and write with their own style. So I just remember when I was in China, my writing was a lot of emotion inside of writing. Of course, you live in the country, you have no freedom. You just feel like you live in a room with no doors, no windows, no lights. All your life, you are not thinking about what is my next meal. Only thing you're thinking, I want to see a little bit of sunlight. I want to hear a bird sing. That's all you want to do. So you had to spend all your life to chisel the wall, try to make a little bit of hole. Maybe the window, you could see a little bit of sunlight. You could see the nature outside. So what do? You fight, right? All the emotion right there. So but when you're communist country, freedom's right here. It's just right everywhere. You can touch it. You can. It's untouchable. It's touchable. It's just right there. So at that time, even you still want to fight. There's almost nothing to fight besides. There's no object from you like a government, like censorship inside China. You always have some kind of thing you can fight, like a boxer. You have a opponent right from you. You could fight. You could punch back. But right here, the biggest enemy is yourself. The big thing to how to do better, live better, to write better is you go inside yourself. Have we learned to fight with ourselves? No, we haven't learned that when we live in China, live in a society like a communist society, the censorship, all those things. So I think then the angle, as I said, angle shifting and the way to approach life, the way to write is also different. So that's something that's really always the movement. If a good writer, try to keep with yourself and open your mind and really observing the things, really listen to your own life's experience, then your style will be changing, update and upgrade too. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I agree with Xue in terms of writing for yourself. I mean, I write in English, and I'm very interested in the relationship between the colonized and the colonizers. And that's not a very popular approach to take amongst my fellow Brits, let's say. Excuse me. Many of them have this mythologized view of how wonderful colonialization was, and they either don't want to see or they're oblivious to the fact that it was a very unfair system with a lot of really terrible behaviors on the part of the colonizers. And these are the kind of things that I write about. And I think because I can speak Chinese, well, let me clarify that. I speak bad Chinese very well. But I have an interaction with local people, and the things I write about resonates with them, but it doesn't really resonate with my fellow Brits. So I have to write for myself. If I wrote for that constituent audience, I'd be writing very different stuff.
Why don't we just open this up to the whole audience? I'm sure you all have plenty of observations and questions.
So all of you are at least bilingual, and I was wondering why you chose a particular language to write your works, and whether you considered either offering a translation of that work in your other language or possibly writing work in that other language.
Well, for myself, it was really just circumstance. I mean, I happen to be educated in northern India, where my language is not spoken. I'm from eastern India, so the official language of education was English, and that's what I learned. And I more or less ended up with that on my hands. But I do think it's one of the interesting things about our circumstance that exactly this idea of the bilingual, because all of us in one way or another are dealing with bilingualism. For me, at home I spoke a different language, so I am dealing with that bilingualism all the time. And I think it creates a certain kind of creative tension in one's work, you know. Because when I started writing 20, 30 years ago, it was considered a sort of peculiar thing, you know, to be writing, to not be writing in your mother tongue, as it were. But now that's the condition for most of the world. You know, people almost everywhere in the world have to contend with English. So the only really monolingual people left on earth are actually Americans, Englishmen, and Australians. You know, all the rest of us have to cope with this, and in that sense, we are all outliers. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel my Cantonese is not good enough to write. In fact, I always say that I can speak 57% Cantonese, and the breakdown of that is that 50% of Cantonese is swearing, which I speak 100%, and then about 7% conversational. So it's not really good enough to write in the language, although I do incorporate phrases in my work. So I can only write in English, but I do find as a poet that English is a very good language for poetry because of its ambiguity, and I think that works very well.
I was born in China, so it's determined I will write in Chinese. And then since I came to this country, you know, I said to live in English, you know, in the language circumstances. So also the English is the most used, the most popular language in the world. So I still do my writing in Chinese. I have a translation team to help me to translate my work from Chinese to English. Most likely have been doing is we'll have these two steps. One is the people who knows Chinese for a while will translate from Chinese to English. Most likely that first step people, they are Chinese or they are English, they are the American English speaker, but they know Chinese for a while. And then after that, then English speaker or American poet or really, you know, a writer will work on the English translation and communicate with me to bring the poem into English, into the good English. So at the beginning, for the first part, I never had a problem. But the second part, in the early time, when I didn't already know English well, I had no conflict with the second translator at all, because they say, this is what I did, how do you think? I say, oh great, wonderful, thank you. And that's always the 3 words. And as when I know English a little bit more, I start to argue with them a little bit. They say, oh, we don't like now, we hope you don't speak English at all, we make our work really much easier. So that's, I really admire Hajing to write in English, and really.
So, but it's a different, no, but my situation is different. In fact, I did look for work related to Chinese. In the early 90s, it was not easy, it was very hard. I couldn't find any job for teaching Chinese. In fact, I applied to many schools, but all my degrees were in English. In fact, I couldn't find a job in the Chinese restaurant even. I always worked in American restaurants. Because in the Boston area, most restaurants originally were owned by Cantonese people. When they could tell you have a northern accent, so I couldn't speak their dialect. So that basically was a survival. There was, but gradually I began to publish. So it became my livelihood. For very practical terms, I couldn't publish anything in Chinese that would count as publication in academia. For very practical reason, I have to publish books in English. And so, in other words, in Chinese, you got on the boat with the thieves. You can't get off. So you just travel along with them.
Yeah, I was thinking historically about this panel coming together of Indian and Chinese writers and Anglo-Chinese writer, and thinking how the space of writing has maybe shifted over the last 20 years over which national people have been writing, in terms of speaking across the national boundaries, not just vis-a-vis China and its diaspora, India and its diaspora, but for Indian and Chinese writing to be in conversation And for these kinds of transnational or rather south-to-south conversations to take place amongst writers and for writing, has that space, the spaces in which these conversations happen, have they changed over the last 20 years? And is there something different about this moment in which these conversations are happening now?
In my experience, it's changed absolutely dramatically. When I first published, at that point there were, several very famous Indian writers. But I do remember that when my first books came out, there's a certain kind of tone that used to be used of us, that we were like the singing dogs kind of. I mean, what was remarkable about our work was that it was done at all, I think that has now completely disappeared. And at the same time, within India as well, there would be a kind of suspicion of, a sort of marginalization of work like ours. That has now completely changed. I mean, in India as well as outside, the work that people, that all of us do, in some strange way is now, no one can marginalize it in a way. And that is a change I've literally seen in my lifetime.
I think in Asia now there are many more literary festivals within the last 10 years, and I think that's made a huge difference. Certainly my own experience is that I'm corresponding with poets from Vietnam, from the Philippines, from Malaysia, Singapore, China, and there's an Asian community that do keep in touch, and that's a very new thing, and I think it's a very good thing of exchanging ideas and inviting each other, and it's a good thing, and more opportunities for publishing as well.
I think this is a very unique moment. In fact, right at the moment, there's a big festival in London. So China, I think, is the host country there. So there were more than 20 writers attending the festival. There was, of course, a lot of protest from the Tibetan writers and also the Chinese writers in exile. So, but in other words, this moment is just, we live in the diaspora, on the outskirts of the different countries. So we couldn't meet at this point. So this is a special moment, a special spot. But there are a lot of things going on. We don't count. I think we are less relevant. But for me, I can accept that. I do feel that, as I mentioned, solitude is a work condition. I am used to it. And in fact, in China, we don't have the word for solitude. So loneliness and solitude are the same word. When you translate Marquez's novel, you can't make this distinction. As a result, it's 百年孤独, 100 years of loneliness. Right? So that shows. So it's a very hard condition for most of the Chinese. But I live in the States for 27 years, so I enjoy being unknown. I am solitary, so for me it's okay. But I appreciate this occasion, this meeting. It's very unique and special.
But what about all those, those poets who went off into the mountains? Didn't they have an idea of solitude?
I was just going to say that. Actually, interesting things actually hundreds of years ago. Yeah, we did not have the word solitude, but hundreds of years ago, those poets, that's their living style.
Yes,
on the back of Tang Dynasty, Song Dynasty, even earlier, when those people, first of all, they pursue their career till they want to have a good lifestyle. They want to work in the government or whatever. Then they either denied or they did not get successful, or by personal reason or the social reason. Then they say, screw you. So then they go to stay in the mountain. They have this. Then become become a pipe, right? Become the strong tradition of our culture, just live as a hermit. To not just hermit, the hermits, they really connect with nature. They like Li Baidu. If you talk about those masters of the Chinese Asian poets, They wrote so many poems about nature. That's basically, that's their lifestyle, what they love. Also, they are kind of full, so they are exiled. So talk about exile, we have a long history in China about that. So, you know, but I also want to back you a little bit. So what I say solitude is really, I think we all know, it's a very, very important factor of as a writer, to write, to listen to your own voice. You can keep it pure and clean when you live in solitude. You can focus much better. You can open your mind widely, sensitively to receive more things. Not when you are speaking the car, right? Oh, what happened to this one?
No, but actually fixing the car is very good for writing poetry.
Is that right? Have a good break.
No, because if you're doing something that keeps your conscious mind busy, then your subconscious is free
Exactly.
to create.
That's why I play table Chinese. I also play table Chinese. That's another way to live my life in a different world, you know.
But to answer Amitav's question, I think traditionally there are a lot of poets. Usually they failed in that popular career or other career. They returned to the countryside or to nature, to the mountains. But most of them, they were very religious. They were either Buddhists or Taoists. So in other words, there is a spiritual nourishment behind them, sustenance behind them. But nowadays, most Chinese writers don't feel that way. They can talk about it, solitude, whatever. They don't feel that way. In fact, just yesterday, I met a writer who was assigned to go to the Iowa International Writers Workshop. I said, why didn't you go? And there was another guy, he wouldn't go. I said, why? It's a good opportunity. You stay there for 3 or 4 months, finishing the drawing of the book. He said, they couldn't endure the loneliness. And that's the answer. They couldn't endure the loneliness.
Talk about living in nature. I don't know, you all know, in the Bell Gallery now has an exhibition. It's one photographer actually took a lot of photos from, I think, another part of the United States. A lot of people now living in the United States, they live there. They are not, literally, they are not artists. They are not the writers or painters. They're just common people, but they choose to live in that lifestyle. Very simple. This is happening in the United States. It's really now it's getting more and more I won't say popular, but it's really a lot more people practice this kind of living style. And also back to mainland China. Even right now, the time we are speaking right now in China, there's one mountain called Zhongnanshan. Now Zhongnanshan has a very long tradition as a lot of Taoists live there. A lot of people fail in the real practical life. They go to there, they live their own lifestyle. Very simple, very original. Even right now, there's thousands people live in that mountain. So people now, when the news come out in China, people go, my God, I could not believe even right now in the 21st century, people still live in that style. So the editor, the reporter, all those try to get in to get the article out, but they are hiding when they see the reporter come. They just, they just escape, they hide it. So, but it's still all the people. There's thousands of people spreading out in the whole mountain, living in a very old Asian style right now.
I have a question that is different from the really fascinating things that you've all been saying. It has to do with the interest in China in training people for the professional study of literature, becoming teachers and scholars and so forth. Here at Brown, my major department is comparative literature, and my other department is French studies. And it turns out that my most recent book, which is about urban theory, made me think about what you said about the explosion of population.
Mm-hmm.
And in relation to literature, it turns out that it's provoked a considerable amount of interest among Chinese students who say they're going to come to Brown to study about Western literature in terms of urban theory as well as Chinese literature. So there is such a student at Brown now. He's very subtle about and quite open about how he handles matters. He doesn't at all deny, he's on a fellowship from the Chinese government. He does not at all hide the issues of censorship and so forth. For example, in terms of where he wants to get a job, if he completes the doctorate and gets a job in the United States, people will want him to teach Chinese literature. On the other hand, he wants to teach French and English 19th century literature. He's aware that if he goes back to China, he will deal with issues of censorship and so forth. Similarly, at a conference in Paris in last December, I encountered a number of people doing a doctorate in comparative literature at the Sorbonne from China, excellent, exquisite French, exquisite control of French, and very eager to learn about what's going on in the United States in terms of comparative literature and study of literature. Now, I don't know if that's related at all to the things that you've been saying, but I thought I would bring it up and see if you have any knowledge of that or any responses to it.
I'm very happy to hear that because I teach at BU every day. I saw hundreds of Chinese students, undergrads, and practically there are wealthy Chinese. They could send their kids abroad for college, but as a result, most of them would continue to go to professional schools, and very few people would do humanities. But there are, China is a big country, there are always people, especially somehow old-fashioned people, they would continue to do literature and to do social sciences. And we have students like that too. In fact, they are savvy. They know, in fact, some of them even better read than American graduate students in Western literature. There are people like that, and I think sure some of them they ended up teaching in the West, in the States, and in Canada. In Canada, a lot of English professors who got degrees from England, and so. But that's a personal choice, and I think there behind the choice there is a kind of dislike or reluctance to return to China because of the social environment. That is still the censorship is there. Most of the schools are still owned by the government, so there are rules, there are lines you have to toe in order to survive in academia. That is the reality. Economically, China has been booming. The living standard has been improved. All these are true, but politically, it is still very, very rigid society.
There are over 200 Chinese graduate students at Brown University, not even including the sponsors and the partners.
Undergrad, right?
Graduate.
But there are
There are a lot of
hundreds of undergrads.
Yeah, hundreds. I'm just talking about the graduate students, and but most of them have studied science in this country, and very few study the literature or humanities. It's just when those people, when they graduate, they could either try to find a job here, or people who study science, they could also. It's easier for them to go back to China because of the political situation in China. And for people who graduate in the humanities and literature, part might be a little bit harder for them to make decisions to go back to live in that kind of circumstances. And so science is still, but it's a funny thing, I read an article talk about in China, I read in Chinese article, and in newspaper say, even in China, there's a survey about 20 most popular colleges and universities in entire China, most accepted or favorite male student from female student point of view. So it's just say, and it's funny, it's only, Tsinghua was in the top 3, but Beida I think Beida is one of the top literary university in China. It's number 1 like Harvard in this country. And Beida should at least like a number 5, number 6, not even the top 3. And also very few university, at least in the top 20. Almost most of them is science. So just say the science because this is from female student view. Say if they are looking for the partners, what kind of people the student and partner male, they would like to look or search from inside university. The reason they say that top 20, they think the science people who study science, they are honest. They are not too crazy in their mind. They are much more practical and they are trustworthy more than people who study literature and the arts. So that's fun.
Also, materially speaking, they are more successful.
Exactly. In China right now, back to what? Let's say 30 years ago, like if you say you walk on the street, you say, "Hey, I'm a poet," all right? And the people, you will see people, stop in front of you, bow you 3 times, right? They say, oh, thank you to be a poet. I really admire you to do this. Please do more good work, for us, for me, write a poem for me or to the society. But even now, if you walk on the street, say I'm a poet, people will walk with you 3 times, say you are psycho. They would just walk away. That's a huge difference.
Yes, but I must tell you, this is the same in India.
It's not that different in Providence.
I'll stand up because I can't actually see you, and it feels odd not being able to make eye contact. I wanted to just return to a little thing you said you played table tennis. One of my former students and dear friend is Deng Yaqing, the Olympic
Ping pong.
champion, and she writes poetry as her hobby, where she plays ping pong as her profession. The other way around, I have to tell her that I met a poet who plays ping pong. But
I already get know her, not just because she's a female, right? Because what is the story?
But when I was working with her and with many other Chinese students, like the colleague here, a question came up which I've been trying to think of, and I'm not sure I'm going to frame it very well. Amitav Ghosh is kind of re-looking at hidden aspects of history of India and China. It feels to me, and from my Chinese students I've been getting this kind of information at Tsinghua and Daidan, which is where I've been working, that China's writers are not yet exploring the back history from 100, 200 years ago. Is that something that is going to come with, is it a question of maturity? Is it a question of assimilating the past century before we can go further back? How does that?
There could be so many reasons, but I think Hajin also could, we all could talk about. But I think there one main reason was the culture. There was a the political campaign called 五四运动, right? During that time, there was some kind of a campaign to, in purpose, cut off the relationship connection between the Chinese tradition and the Chinese, the modern literature. So I think that political campaign did a lot of negative part of damage to this cut off relation between. And beside that, the writer from writer to writer personally, so for me, I'm purposely pursuing the connection between my writing with Chinese classical writing poetry. That's a personal thing. But to answer your question, I mean, there's so many reasons, but one main reason I'll think about because that political.
I think also what has been provided for Chinese scholars, or just people, regular readers, they were very often, the materials were selected, censored by the authorities. So as a result, a lot of things we don't know. So, in fact, for instance, Amitav's book, no Chinese writer could write a book like that because they don't have the perspective how Indians, how India is part of this business in the global context. So there are a lot of corners in history that have never been scrutinized by the Chinese. So very often, we only have some kind of everything on the table given by by different offices. So that was the big problem. When you look, if you turn it over, a lot of things, different events, you turn it to a different perspective, but then you can see different things. You have different views, but that was very often is not allowed. I think that was very often is censored by the different offices. Very often the Chinese writers inside China, they have the inner censorship built in for decades. They automatically, they know. In fact, I know. If I write something in Chinese, I know what will be printed, what might not be printed. So I have to be aware of that.
That's very interesting. But I must tell you this as well, that this whole subject of, say, the opium and this history, even though in India we don't have a state repression, a state censorship, it was effectively nobody had spoken about it, read about it, and that was what was to me the most astonishing thing. Yeah. This thing which played such a large part in our world, in our economy, was completely silenced.
So in fact, in the U.S. history, a lot of things a lot of events are like that as well. It's not just in China.
So what Harding said is so true, the censorship inside your writer itself, when you write, you kind of know what will be printed, what is not printed. But that's one way to think. You have to think about a lot of people who, a lot of writers live in China. They mainly write, they say, okay, after 1 year or half year, what I published would put me in prison or not. They also would think about that situation. And also to directly answer your question when you say, oh, another thing is since China opened the door, so many translations and literary translation got gashed into China. So the younger generation writers, they are growing under so much influence of the foreign literature influence. So that voice is so loud, it's louder than for them to hear their own culture back to thousands of years ago. So that's another reason more people are pursuing the modern the technology or writing or the other one. That's another way to kind of cut off the connection from the past.
Yeah, I'm trying to get them to relate the shall we say Western outside literature that they're reading very often in translation, sometimes in the original, to literary traditions in their own history, but they don't know them at all. They simply don't have that background, the collocation.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a famous saying, I heard this quite often by some young Chinese. They said they began to learn a foreign language in order to learn about other countries. As a result, once they learn enough of the language, they began to learn more about China.
Yeah.
Also, this is part of a history pattern, right? The older generation, they actually have more awareness and effort to learn the tradition. But the younger generation, people born in the 90s, they are computer and the iPad and all the game in the world, they are also automatically cut off with the past.
Let's maybe take one more question and then we have to feed these people.
I waited so long, I forgot the question. Myself, I was born in the mainland China, the coastal area, Canton, Guangzhou. And I escaped into Hong Kong back in the late 60s. Lived there for 10 years and came to the US. So my experience with different, constant moving, so seems like I learned a lot from each part. My question is, since now each time I going back to China, looks like things are start opening up. I see a lot of freedom already compared to when the time I escaped. My question to the panel would be, I'm an inspiring comedy writer. I would like a 5-minute elevator advice from the panel. What do I have to watch out for? Is using the American style comedy to write, like for example, film or stand-up comic. What area I should watch out for besides making fun of the leaders?
Well, making fun of the leaders in Hong Kong is currently a national sport, so as long as
I know Hong Kong, China, how far I can go. What kind of comic would appeal to the emerging middle class, for example?
Oh, really, I don't have, I really, because comedy jokes are the most difficult part in writing, especially when you use foreign language. In fact, conventional, there's a theory, as a non-native speaker, you are not supposed to make jokes in the language. You can achieve some kind of fluency near the native speakers, but you cannot make jokes. But gradually, I think this rule is now completely obsolete. There are a lot of non-native speakers who would make jokes. Nabokov started, and basically he developed a style based upon mistakes and fragments, distortions of the language. So I think that's why I don't, one thing I would say, don't be afraid to use mistakes and distortion to create your own kind of style. I think that was really started by Nabokov. If you look at it, a lot of his novels, particularly Punin, you can see a lot of verbal games. So you would say, when you say this is a nutshell for Vita, and then the narrator would say a coconut shell because it's very big, a coconut shell. A cocktail, he would say flamingo tail because it's stronger and more colorful. So that kind of a foreignness, a kind of alien eye on the language, I think that is high kind of jokes. It's very hard to create, but it is the high, really a kind of a great achievement if you can manage it.
I don't know if you've seen the recent play by David Henry.
Oh yeah, that's another
called
example.
Chinglish.
Yeah, Chinglish, yes.
Which is quite hilarious, particularly if you know a little Chinese and a little English. I mean, it is really quite hilarious, and it's all about that slippage of language. You know, it is important, I think, and maybe fertile ground for an aspiring company.
But you also mentioned a visa, right? Is a visa from China? Yeah. Did you mention something about visa and to get a visa from? No, maybe I misunderstood.
Oh, I have the MasterCard.
No.
That's better than a visa.
I'm not talking about credit card, I'm talking about you.
That person. Thank you very much.
There is this new.
That's a good example.
Yeah, that's karmic, right? That's karmic. Yeah, that's exactly.
So
I was serious.
So that's hope for me.
That's cool. There's this new Toyota ad too. Have you seen the Toyota ad where there's this Chinese couple, right?
Yeah.
And
That's kind of cheesy.
the
though.
guy is asking, is trying to sell them this car, and then they switch over to Chinese, as I've seen a million times
Yeah.
with my parents. They switch over to Chinese to tell each other, about their negotiating strategy, and at the very end, he
Yeah.
answers them in Chinese. And so, I think there are this question of language and the question of ways in which our world is so interchanged now in terms of the flows of people, of language, of ideas, and so forth. It's an extraordinary moment. So I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our guests here. It's really been a marvelous opportunity for conversation.